And welcome back. Here we are now beginning our very first session of the event, Speed Safety Cameras in Work Zones. So it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Martha Kapitanoff with FHWA. She's currently a transportation specialist on the FHWA headquarters work zone management team. She's worked for FHWA for over 25 years, and in her current capacity, she provides leadership and guidance to the development and implementation of effective work zone management practices and innovations on a national level. Martha is the FHWA team lead for the Work Zone Speed Safety Cameras Initiative, National Work Zone Awareness Week, Access and Egress Points in Work Zones Initiative, and she manages a few Work Zone safety grants. She holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Puerto Rico. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to you, Martha, and let's begin the event.
Thank you, Matt. With me today, I have Juan Pava from Illinois DOT. Juan serves as the State Highway Safety Programs Unit Chief, overseeing the work zone safety, railroad highway crossing safety, and vulnerable road user safety engineering programs in Illinois. He has served the Illinois Department of Transportation for over 15 years. Juan is an active member of committees with industry organizations that promote work zone safety and has served in multiple NCHRP panels. Juan received an undergraduate degree from the Georgia Institute of Technology in Civil and Environmental Engineering and is a licensed registered professional engineer in the state of Illinois. Then after Juan, we will have Kyle Miller. He has worked for the Washington State Department of Transportation for almost 23 years. He's the Speed Safety Camera Systems Program Manager within Washington State DOT Transportation Operations Division. Prior to this role, he was an active member of WSDOT Cooperative Automotive Transportation, also known as CAT team, where he collaborated with several internal and external partners to develop WSDOT role and strategic vision regarding CAT. Before that, he worked for WSDOT Multiple Planning and Data Division, helping to develop and manage the community planning portal while leading an agency. So with that, I will give you a presentation, an overview of the work zone speed safety cameras. I think everybody can see this. Okay. Justin, I don't think, okay. So everybody can see this. As any federal highway presentation, we have to have some disclaimers. So basically we're sharing that information for your awareness, and nothing that we are sharing is a requirement. Next, please. Thank you. So I wanted to share some of the work zone safety trends. The recent 10 years trend in crashes occurring in work zones, including fatalities and estimated injuries, illustrate a need for strategies to improve work zone safety. So unfortunately, you see that the numbers continue to go up. 2022 is the latest national data available through NHTSA FARS data. Another thing that I wanted to share is that this other graph that you may or may not have seen it on the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse. It shows the vehicles, miles traveled, and highway construction spending basically have remained relatively stable over the 10-year period from 2012 to 2021. That fatal work zone crashes and fatalities occurring in work zones have increased. Next, please. When we looked at the data from 2011 compared to 2012, unfortunately, speeding continues to be a factor in over 30% of work zone fatal crashes. Next, please. A few years ago, some of you may have been part of this effort where Federal Highway conducted regional workshops and received input from many stakeholders and agreed on 11 strategic objectives to enhance work zone safety nationally. The report is available online. And one of the strategic objectives was to use speed safety camera or look into the use of speed safety cameras as part of an objective to minimize driver behaviors that contribute to work zone crashes. Next one, please. Oh, I forgot, I'm sorry, go back to the previous one. Oh no, sorry. That's good, next one, please. Yes, thanks. Sorry, delay a little bit. For Federal Highway, we also, on our Office of Safety, had look into new proven safety countermeasures, and speed safety camera is now one of the 28 proven safety countermeasures because it promotes based on studies that shows decrease in crashes. Next one, please. At our US DOT level, the National Roadway Safety Strategy has added work zone safety as one of the strategies. And also in 2023, NHTSA and Federal Highway Office of Safety updated the speed safety camera program planning and operations guide, where speed safety cameras is also a, again, proven safety countermeasure for Federal Highway, but also NHTSA has given a 5 stars to speed safety cameras as a countermeasure that works. Next, please. I have a new project with Federal Highway Administration on the use and effectiveness of work zone speed safety cameras. The idea is to develop outreach materials to supplement the US DOT speed safety camera guide that I shared with you earlier. It is important to remember that gaining the public trust is essential, and safety should be the emphasis when deploying speed safety cameras. We want the driving public and workers to be safe while going through a work zone. Next slide, please. Additionally, a work zone speed safety camera program should examine possible equity impacts on underserved or overburdened communities. Speed safety cameras are one available approach to reduce speeds and should be considered alongside other strategies to improve work zone safety, such as the use of law enforcement to encourage drivers to comply with speed limits. Next one, please. Work zone speed safety camera authorization and operations can vary significantly and have expanded over time. For example, today we'll have Juan talked about to talk and present about Illinois' program that has been for over 15 years. Illinois and Maryland have both operated, again, work zone speed programs for many years, and they have learned a lot. We have learned a lot through them as well. And again, that's one of the reasons why we have Juan and then Kyle talk about the projects or program in Washington, Kyle's presentation. Next, please. In total, as of August 2024, 14 states are operating or developing work zone speed safety camera pilots and programs. In Oregon's case, a work zone speed safety camera can only operate in specific municipalities. Next, please. I mentioned that I have a project developing a few outreach materials, but we also hosted last week a peer exchange in coordination with Pennsylvania DOT and Pennsylvania Turnpike. This was a day-and-a-half peer exchange with not only presentations, but also a demo site. Next, please. 29 public agencies and the District of Columbia joined the event in person or virtually. We also have participations from Federal Highway and Federal Motor Carrier. Next one, please. We had multiple presentations from state DOTs that have legislation to implement a work zone speed safety camera program in their states. The presentations will be available on the clearinghouse. If you go later on, actually, if you go to the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse website under the topic of interest, smarter work zones, then you find the speed safety camera tab. That's where we'll be posting at a later date the presentations discussed on last week. But you could go right now and find presentations shared during a peer exchange that we conducted last year. Next one, please. This is just a link to find the speed safety camera program planning and operations guide that I mentioned earlier. It is a great guide with a lot of steps and information for implementing speed safety camera programs in general, not only for work zones, but also on in schools. And as I mentioned, my task is to, or my new project is basically to develop materials to complement this guide, basically helping local agencies, transportation agencies to look at the guide, but also see how to implement it in work zone setups. That also, I mentioned earlier that this information will be available on the National Work Zone Safety Information Clearinghouse website under Smarter Work Zones Speed Safety Camera tab. Next one, please. The proven safety countermeasures that Federal Highway has developed 28 proven safety countermeasures. Later on this week, you will have somebody from our Office of Safety, Phil Bobbitt, talk about proven safety countermeasures and work zones. So I hope you stick around and especially on Thursday to hear about this new product. The other thing is the Federal Highway Work Zone Management Program, as well as the safety program, has funding to support site visits, peer exchanges, and other activities that your state or locality may need during the implementation of speed safety cameras and work zones in general. Next one, please. And I have, out of the materials that I mentioned on the outreach materials, we have published two. One is the speed safety camera, an overview fact sheet, and then the second material available is a checklist for implementing work zone speed safety cameras. So I hope you have an opportunity later on to look at these. And if you have any questions, next one, please. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. We will be taking questions after everybody's presentation. So with that being said, I will let Juan go through his presentation.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, I think that I have screen control. So once again, my name is Juan David Pava. I am the Safety Programs Unit Chief with the Illinois Department of Transportation. Have been with the department for about 15 years, and still that way. Even though I've been there for 15 years, this program predates me. So we have a long-standing and in continuous flux program, and I'm happy to be able to share with you some of the history as well as some of the details and lessons learned from our program. So here's a brief outline of what I'm going to be covering today. Give you some history on the program. I'll walk you through some of the details on our current legislation and some of the noteworthy items within the legislation. Give you some details on our current contract or procurement, and give you some tips on some of the things that we have learned from our operation. So trying to go through about 20 years of history in 30 seconds or so, here is the history of our program. So as a response to overall increase in fatalities and serious injuries and works on fatalities and serious injuries in the early 2000s, the Illinois Department of Transportation, in coordination with industry associations and with Illinois State Police, worked together to get a law into the books. And the law that allowed us to deploy automated speed enforcement was effective in 2004. Shortly after that, we put together a pilot program that spanned from 2006 to 2008 in coordination with Illinois Center for Transportation at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign to try to quantify the benefits of these programs, as well as to help us better understand what is the process associated with deployment, issuance, and adjudication of citations. The findings of this pilot program and research were published in 2010, and the research showed that there is a pretty significant decrease to operating speeds for those locations where the speed photo enforcement units are deployed, as well as also helping with lowering operating speeds for adjacent or work zones nearby. So after the program, the research, the pilot program was completed. We got right on the we got busy trying to get a contract going. So the original contract. Or the first contract that Illinois had spanned the years of 2013 through 2023. and these allowed us to have 5 different units that we could move throughout the state. And then the first contract finalized in December of 2023, December of 2022, January 1st, 2023, and this original contract now went into effect in June of 2023, and it should be able to provide services until the end of 2026. And it also has 2 3-year option renewals, so we can effectively have provide services through the end of 2032. So we have another 10 years where we can have a single vendor. Okay, so I want to talk just a little bit about legislation and what is it that we have and some of the lessons that we have learned. So but potentially the most important puzzle piece of this whole program is the legislation. So any time that is invested in identifying how the legislation will affect your program is crucial. You know, the devil is in the details. So make sure that you pay a close attention to what is being put into the legislation being moved forward, and ensure that your agency or the agencies that you're going to be working with are capable of administering and working your program within the legislative requirements. You may only get one chance to pass legislation, so you'll want to make sure that you make it count. As I said, any time invested in drafting and making sure that you understand the legislation that is being put forward, as well as how any legislation may affect any existing legislation, is extremely important. And some of the details of the legislation are extremely important and crucial, and will affect you know, the way in which, you know, you have to run the program. So for instance, for Illinois, some of the details are that worker presence is required, and the burden of proof that workers were present is on the state. So we have to make sure that we keep good records to ensure that the citations that are issued are valid. Also, our legislation says that pictures collected can only be used for speed citations in work zones, so they cannot be used for any other type of moving violations, such as you know, seatbelt use or distracted driving or anything like that. Our legislation allows for a fully automated system to be deployed. However, we continue to rely on Illinois State Police to operate our units. Our legislation says or states that infractions result in moving violation that require a positive identification of the driver. So our legislation actually issues a moving violation to the driver of the vehicle, not to the registered owner. And it sets a 14 days limit for the adjudication or for the issuance of a citation. So we have a very constrained time that in which many different steps need to take place to ensure that a citation gets issued. So just to reiterate a couple points that are, you know, important in our legislation and affect the way in which we operate our program is that if the driver of the vehicle cannot be identified through the photograph or other recorded image, then the owner of the vehicle is not liable for the fine. So the citation is issued to the driver at the time of the infraction. And you know, and we believe that some of these details are encouraged or are in place to encourage behavior change and to target the driver, not the registered owner. However, all of these requirements within the legislation do increase the complexity of the processing, and they require a lot more steps for verification. So just to give you you know, some I guess idea of the complexity of the processes behind issuance of citations behind these programs, you know, I put this nifty little flow chart here that shows all the different steps that have to take place for a citation to be issued, and there's many different checks to also increase the confidence of you know, all the different stakeholders that we're not just issuing citations willy-nilly, but we're actually going through multiple different checks. And I listed some of the steps that each event goes through. So once you deploy the vehicle, there's an event capture. Then the data within that event needs to go through deployment validation, data transfer, quality control review, DMV pool, quality assurance review. The data needs to be transferred multiple times. It needs to be verified multiple times. There's multiple reviews from the client. There's got to be a driver identification, citation issuance, and print and mail. So so it's very important that once again you think about how the requirements within the legislation will affect your processes, and try to make it as simple as possible or simplify that process. Want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about how our procurement or contracting is set up and what are some of the details on our contract. So our current contract was executed June of 2023, as I mentioned earlier, and the last of the 5 vehicles was delivered in June of 2024. And I mentioned this to just point out that there is likely going to be a lag of time between contract being executed and for your vehicles or your units to be deployed. And the more complex the system you have, the longer that lag between contract execution and delivery will be. So if you're getting into getting a program off the ground, it's important that you account for that potential lag of time. Now, our current contract was improved based on many of the lessons learned from the first contract, the one that spanned from 2013 to 2023. Our current program is a vehicle-based system, so we have 5 units, and they're self-contained in vehicles like the one pictured here. It is a lighter speed detection compared to what we previously had, which was a radar speed detection. This LiDAR system allows us to collect multiple lanes at the same time. It has 3 cameras, 2 that take a front vehicle picture and 1 that takes a back vehicle picture. Under the contract requirements, the vendor provides all the services and support for the issuance and processing of citations. Something that we included in this contract that we didn't have before is a performance-based adjustment. So the vendor is required to submit performance metrics every month with invoicing, and based on any controllable or uncontrollable items for rejection of citations, the percentage that they get paid for the cost of each one of the vehicles is adjusted. So the vendor gets paid a set amount per unit per month, and also they get paid a processing and printing mailing fee per citation. So they get paid per vehicle per month, plus any citations that get issued, they get a fee per citation. So in addition on many of the equipment processing and maintenance provided through the contract, there are many moving parts on the operation of this program. So good communication and constant coordination and with your vendor is key to make sure that you are able to juggle all of the different issues that will come up in your operation of the program. So it takes time and coordination to certify operators, to determine site selection, and to respond to citizen complaints. So it's very important for you to really think through all of the different moving parts that are required to take you from a vehicle delivery to the deployment of a unit on the side of the road, and account for all the time that it will take for you to get you from point A to point B. For us, it continues to be a program in flux, so you have to make sure that you make the processes are adaptable and are changing, and you're able to to be flexible and document all the different decisions that are made, so processes can be replicated. So think about, what you have to do about officer training, about, like setup and adjustment of vehicle deployment, site selection, all the processing and periodic administration is very important for you to think about all the different moving parts and who is going to be responsible for each one of those. So in closing, I want to just kind of like reiterate some of the points that I believe have been very valuable for us to really, or like some of the lessons that we have learned. First, legislation can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So you want to make sure that you spend the time and detail and you try to get as much consensus throughout your your stakeholders to ensure that everyone is on board of what you're trying to accomplish here. You want to make sure that you are cognizant of any technology limitations and try to write an RFP that is broad enough that allows you to have the latest technology when you're going to deliver. You don't want to be so specific in your contracts that it will tie you to a specific type of technology. You want to make sure that you look at performance metrics and you try to incorporate some sort of encouragement to the vendor to make sure that they are doing everything they can to respond promptly to any potential hurdles throughout the implementation of these systems, and try to encourage good performance. It is harder than it seems, so plan to invest some time. However hard you think it is, it's a little bit harder than that. So make sure that you account for that and that you set realistic expectations to your stakeholders and your leadership, perhaps. And last but not least, you want to make sure that you continue to reiterate that the goal of this program is safety and compliance, and is not just earning money. So you want to make sure that you continue to drive that point down, and that will help you try to get a little bit more consensus and better buy-in from all your different stakeholders. So with that, here's my contact information. I believe we're going to leave questions to the end of the session. Please feel free to reach out to me or to anytime, and I'll be happy to reiterate in any or expand in any of the items that were covered here. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, and he's going to talk a little bit about what he's doing up in Washington.
Kyle, you're up next. Kyle, is your mic on? I'm not hearing. There we go. Ooh.
Kyle, I think you're still muted, Kyle. Yeah, I think you're unmuted now.
Ugh.
Still muted.
We're showing him as unmuted, but we're not hearing him.
Right, hi Kyle. Yeah, it seems you're unmuted in the system. Perhaps you can select your audio device in the settings here.
You hear anything?
Oh,
There we go.
Okay, I don't know what happened between our test and our real life thing, but now you can hear me, so that's great. All right. So my name's Kyle Miller, like I said. I'm WSDOT Speed Safety Camera Systems Program Manager, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our program here in Washington. There's a lot of similarities that Juan mentioned earlier to our program, but that's great. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about what happened in Washington. So obviously during the pandemic, we saw quite a rise in speeding incidents in our work zones, not necessarily in the work zones also, but also statewide. There was a quite increase of speeds going across the entire state, and we needed to really figure out how to kind of try and slow things down. And obviously, the work zone speed cameras is one of the tools that we decided to use. Our initial change. Back up. Now I'm having technical difficulties on this end. Okay, come on. It was going so much smoother earlier. One of the biggest things that we found that was really most important to this was really partnership. Our program is broken into two main responsibilities. WashDOT has other responsibilities for implementing and administering procurement and operating the cameras in the active work zones around the state. And then we have a strong partnership with our state patrol, Washington State Patrol. They're in charge of enforcement and issuance of infractions, along with the adjudication process is being worked on by the Washington Office of Administrative Hearings. So the three of us have a real strong partnership that we've formed over the last 2 years or so to really help with this and driving this need for automated speed enforcement to where we're at today. We had strong partnerships also from the USI group, stands for Unions, Senators, and Industry, and also within Washington, the Washington Asphalt Pavement Association were really key in helping us kind of push forward, really hearing from industry and the contractors on really understanding that the safety of their workers is very important. And also, along with those groups, we also worked with many of our state agencies within the key partners in this group with State Patrol, OAH, the Washington Traffic Safety Commission, Department of Licensing, and DES. We are getting lots of guidance and working with the governor's office, as well as several state legislatures, and also the Office of Financial Management from Washington. So kind of all these partnerships together has pushed us to where we're at today. And really trying to slow traffic down in our work zones. So I'll talk a little bit about what the program is. So like I said, in 2023, March 2023, the first bill passed unanimously through the House and Senate. And that introduced 4663-200, which allowed us to really work with automated speed enforcement in our work zones. And then in 2024, we had a little bit more. We did some amendments. We kind of cleaned up some language, and we developed a graduated penalty structure for this. So we have a $0 first violation. It's not a warning. It can be considered a warning, I guess, but it is actual violation, and our state patrol needs to verify those infractions. And then after that, there's a $248 infraction for the second, and thereon after, as many as people can pick up, I guess. Hopefully they slow down after the first $0 infraction. We've worked with our Department of Licensing. Instead of sending it to collections, it's almost like a collections type thing. They have the authority to suspend vehicle registrations for unpaid violations or ignored violations. These non-moving violations, so they will not impact insurance rates or anything like that. They're really got to be processed similar to a parking infraction. They're more of a civil crime or civil penalty than anything. And the department is really working right now on putting a public awareness campaign together, so we can really get out and tell the story of what these cameras do, what they're for, why we're really trying to slow traffic down in our work zones, and really make sure that the safety messages get out there. We are not in the business of just saying, I got you, putting up speed traps, or is this intended to be a revenue generator at all? All the money itself that comes in from this will go back into the program, and any extra money, if there is any, will go to DUI emphasis, or driver education and things like that. It's not being earmarked for any projects by any means, because the intent is not to be a revenue generator. Our cameras will be in place through early 2025 through June 30th, and at that time they'll reassess to see if it needs to be a more permanent a program, something similar to what has been done in Pennsylvania as well. So we will have our first deployment sometime in January of this year is what we're hoping for. So, and I'm just going to kind of do a quick, we'll see how this thing works with some technical difficulties, but I'm just kind of showing you exactly what the drivers will see as they come into a work zone. So as you see this little happy green cars driving down the road, eventually you'll see the signs, the work zone enforcement signs. Signage is big because we're really trying to make sure that folks know that they're entering into a work zone that is, being monitored for speed. And as they go through, they'll see things when we can. We'll put up the radar feedback cameras just to indicate, the vehicle speed as they're kind of working into the work zone themselves. The entire time these cameras are enforcing, workers have to be present. So that's the main key here. We have to have workers present at our work zones in Washington for enforcement to occur. So as they keep going through, they'll see things like this trailer. This is an actual prototype of the trailer that we ended up using, that we ended up selecting. So this is what folks will see on the side of the road. It'll be a bright orange trailer with these cameras set up throughout. But either way, it's going to be clearly marked that this is the work zone camera unit. And we wanted to have these mobile in a trailer set up like this so they're easily moved around work zone to work zone, so we don't need to have a whole bunch of them. We can move them around as needed. So as the vehicle goes through, the camera itself will capture the things like that as it goes through. We're making sure that no images of the drivers are taken because we're not focused on the driver themselves. It's more the registered owner of the vehicle. And this way, WashDOT, the State Patrol, and anything will not see passengers, drivers, or anybody inside. We are not taking pictures of any of the occupants in the vehicle. But after it's captured, after the the images have been captured, the vendor will review it. They'll verify that there's several things like ownership of the vehicle. They can see the license plate and make sure all these things match. They'll send it over to the State Patrol for final review. And in the process, come on, move. Then in that same time, we'll mail out a letter. It's something that may look similar to this. We're in the process of developing that right now. And then after that, obviously, the person will be able to either just pay the fine and say, yes, this was me, or go through and go through the Office of Administrative Hearings and dispute the ticket. Again, traffic infractions captured by the work zone speed cameras will not go on the owner's driving record again, so it does not impact people's insurance rates. And working with Office of Administrative Hearings, they will be able to have things such as payment plans and other stuff like that put in place if they so need to. This is kind of where we're at today. We just awarded our vendor within the last 6 weeks or so. We're working on implementation right now. So there's several steps to be done before implementation, but we are working in that direction right now. So, and that's kind of really what I am, but where we're at today. The bottom line is, we see this program as very, very instrumental in helping slow traffic down in our work zones to reduce injuries and crashes, not just for the workers themselves, but also for the traveling public alike. During this process, we really have come to find out that we need to have strong partnership, and be really collaborative. And that's what's been great working with, USI and WAPA, State Patrol, OAH, and others on this team. It's much bigger than just one agency. And it really is kind of going through as a well-oiled machine. So at this point, things are looking good, and we really do hope to have our first deployment set up on a work zone in January at some point. So with that, that's all I really have for this. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kyle. And maybe we have a few questions for you. We can have our panelists maybe turn the cameras back on, and I will direct the questions to Martha, and then she can kind of redistribute them to the panel. So the first one that comes in, and this actually may be a question for Martha, how many states currently have work zone enforcement through speed safety cameras?
14 states. I had a map showing that either they have a pilot that's soon to have a deployment like Washington State, and then or others with programs in place.
Okay. Let's see. A question has come in. This was probably during Mark's. Would you mind sharing who the vendor is? I guess maybe another state's interested. Maybe that was one. I don't know who was talking about. They're just signing up their vendor.
Yeah, well, I can say who Washington's vendor is, and I think right now we're working with a company called Elevate. It's they work out of Medexto brand, I guess, but Elevate is the company that we're working with to implement our trailer systems.
Same with Illinois. We're working with the same company.
Okay. Another question, what occurs if a family member is driving your vehicle? If the registered owners expect to rat them out or dispute the charge, how does that work?
So the officer is required to make a positive identification of the driver. So the picture of the registered owner or the driver's license associated with the registered owner of the vehicle need to match the person that was driving at the time of the event. If the officer that is doing the validation is not able to make a match, then a citation is not issued and mailed out.
And so that's a little different than Washington. We cannot identify the drivers like that. So we're working on identifying the registered owner of the vehicle. So if it's somebody else who is driving, they have the opportunity to, talk about that, who that was, but everything goes towards the registered owner of the vehicle. I think it'll definitely make some good conversation around the dinner table as things progress.
Yeah, it's important to remember that even though there are 14 states or localities within a state that have legislation allow them to implement work zone speed safety cameras, their legislation could be differently in a way, not only for the fines, but also how the violation type. So that's important. And some of our case studies that we're working on will show some of the difference of the states that we are working on the case studies.
Good. Have you found that a work zone camera enforcement to work better than just having state police sitting in the work zone? What is the feedback?
Juan, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, I can give it a try. So there are different tools. There are different tools in your toolbox. The speed photo enforcement or the speed safety cameras, help you with normalizing and maybe calming traffic in a different way than an officer helps you with many other potential things. Also, if an officer is tied up with a person writing a citation or doing something different, their impact on curbing speeds may be diminished. So I think there are different tools for different types of needs out there in the work zone. And I think that a benefit of speed safety cameras compared to regular enforcement is that they are able to capture many more drivers in a single location and maybe be a more educational component of it, with someone getting a citation on the mail or a warning on the mail saying, hey, you were caught speeding, we're watching you, make sure that you obey the speed limit out there when you're working through work zone. So I think they're slightly different. They're just different tools and they should be used together.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although we haven't had a deployment in Washington, we are looking at this as an enhancement to, with working with the officers. We know that the officers are short-staffed, and that this it complements, the work that they're trying to do. Of course, everybody would love to have an officer sitting in the work zone, but that's not feasible at this time. And so, like what he was saying earlier, it does give us an opportunity to kind of create a halo effect around those work zones and really try and slow folks down as they enter them. Because ultimately, we are more concerned about the safety of our workers and traveling public than we are anything else. So hopefully, it's just another tool that will work for us in the future to increase safety.
Sorry, had to turn my mic on. So another question here. I think Illinois have the longest program, but it's question: has there ever been a state that started up one of these programs but felt that it wasn't effective and wanted to get rid of it?
Brad, you were breaking up a little bit, but I believe the question is that, has there been a state that had a program and decided that it was not beneficial and decided to stop it? I'm not familiar with any states that stopped a program. I believe that there are multiple states there are a few states that did have pilot programs but did not have legislation go through afterwards. So there's a gap in between when the pilot program finalized and the permanent legislation went through. On the benefit of these programs, I think that there's more and more evidence as time goes by that these programs are beneficial, both for decreasing operating speeds as well as reducing crashes. So I think that it's getting easier and easier for states to actually justify the existence of these programs. But Kyle, I think that you have something on this.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, it did take us quite a while to get to this point where we're at today. We at Washington State had done a couple pilots for this. We did a pilot in 2007 and I think another pilot in 2012. And obviously it's 2024 now, so it did take us some time to kind of work through this, to kind of get to where we're at today. It's just a long haul, so.
Yeah, and this goes back to, my comment of how important it is to spend time and resources in making sure that your legislation or your final legislation is something that you can live with, because you may only get a single chance to get legislation through. So make sure that you, with whomever is pushing legislation in your state, that you work with them, so they understand your capabilities and you know what you're getting into.
Thank you.
And I was gonna, sorry, go ahead.
Finish. I was gonna move on, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna repeat again about the Clearinghouse website. Again, topics of interest, smarter work zones, TAP, speed safety cameras, because we have shared some evaluations that are already available online for multiple states that have done their program, and they do annual reports. So if you're interested in learning more about those, again, we have those online.
Thank you, Martha. And there is a question that applies. It was directed here, but I think it applies broadly. So all the presentations that are shared at the Work Zone Conference, unless the presenter prefers that it's not going to be shared, we will put them in PDF format and make them available on the Clearinghouse website. So those will be available. All right. Another question here. This was kind of directed at Illinois, but I think it's for all of you. How do you confirm who the operator is of the vehicle, especially, we kind of went through this, especially if someone other than the operator is, what about rental vehicles? You know, the operator's different register. You kind of went through some of that, but rental vehicles does raise a different point. Yes, the rental company is going to know who rented it at that time, but.
Yeah, and so there is a process for issuing citations to the rental vehicles. However, I don't think that we have really used that portion. In fact, the legislation explicitly lists that an affidavit of non-liability is to be made available for fleet vehicles and rental vehicles. So that is part of our business rules as well. But the majority of citations that are issued are for, you know, in those instances where the register owner can be identified as the driver at the time of the violation by the operating officer.
So there's several questions here that kind of touch on this. I'll try to combine them because we need to end in 3 minutes. But this is talking about basically speed reductions when traveling in work zones, and what is the typical cutoff for citations? You know, how far over the speed limit do they need to be going before that's kicked in? I imagine that's maybe a state-by-state issue, but how are you handling that? At what point do you issue a ticket? How much of a violation?
Yeah, so there's been I guess, a movement on newer legislation states to set a threshold in the legislation. Illinois has an old legislation that does not specify a threshold for issuing a citation. The threshold for issuing a citation is determined at the time of deployment by the operating officer. So the officer, you know, operating the unit will determine, you know, what you know, threshold is to be, you know, implemented with his or her understanding of what the state attorneys would be willing to prosecute, as well as what are some of the field conditions as well. So it is up to the officer in Illinois.
Kyle or Martha, any comments on that?
I was going to say some states have similar to what Juan said, and then some states they're just by legislation will say 11 miles per hour, 10, 15. So it varies. Again, the use of speed safety camera depend on the legislation per state.
Yeah, what we have seen most common for those states that are putting thresholds in the legislation is 15 miles per hour. I mean, sorry, 11 miles per hour. So 11 miles per hour. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, panelists, for being here. You've done wonderful. We'll turn it back over to Matt for instructions on where we go from here.
Thanks, Brad, and thank you again to all of our panelists. Fantastic session. We're going to go ahead and end this session now, and in just 5 minutes, we'll begin our next session, which is connected vehicle data for work zone metrics. So what y'all want to do, just like the last time, you'll want to, when this closes down, you'll want to go ahead back to that hub that had all the links to show you what to click on, and click on that connected vehicle data session. So we will see you momentarily. Thanks.
Okay.